Hey everybody, how's it going? I thought it's been a couple of years since I've done a completely free Reaper template. And just to be absolutely clear, this mix was made with 100% free sounds and plugins. My aim with this was to make a modern metal track and also to make it as simple as possible while still achieving the results I'm after. So let's just jump in. For the drums, I've got PD Player loaded up. This is Perfect Drums. This is the full version, but PD Player is completely free. Download it and it'll look like this. And what I'm using is the Restrains Kit from Panda Sound. It is a completely free, mix-ready, metal-voiced drum kit. All you do is go on the sampler window on PD Player, click on Kit Designer, load sampler kit, find the Restrains Kit file for Perfect Drums, and that's about it. The only thing I've changed is with the snare, it had some reverb on it, which I just took down all the way. It's a very heavy-handed kit, and it's definitely not versatile. I came very close to using ML Drums Free, which is a great kit, but I find that the Restrains Kit is just completely mix ready, and it's way more metal and way more heavy-handed, which is what I wanted for this track. Going to the EQ, I use a similar EQ on most kits. Just got a shelf at 47 to keep things tight. A little dip at 160 to get rid of a frequency I didn't like there. And a fairly hefty cut of 400. This is where things can get a little bit sort of cloudy. And a fairly hefty cut there. And where things get a bit spiky around 10K, I just did a little cut there too. So there's no extra processing on these drums whatsoever. I've not split up the tracks to mix every piece individual. There's just the samples going into this EQ, and that is it. I'll let you hear the kit by itself soloed. I mean, as you can hear, it's very processed and a little bit artificial, but that's the sound of modern drums, really. If I was going for a more natural feel, I'd probably go with ML Drums Free. Okay, the bass guitar. I've used this chain on pretty much every mix for the past 2 or 3 years, and it's just my go-to. TSE BOD, it's a bass Sans amp plugin, and it works really great. It's just giving me that nice, driven, processed bass tone. And there's no IRs, nothing after this except for EQ and compression. So we've just got some EQ, low shelf just to keep it out of the way of the kick drum. And then some big scoops going on in the mids, keep it out of the way of the guitars. And then a nice cut of 5K just to keep some of the spikiness away. Compression, I've got the Driving Rock Bass preset inside Reaper. This is Recomp. I've just adjusted the threshold until I'm getting just a few dB of gain reduction. That's all it needed. And then what I do is I copy and I paste the same bass performance below, and then I have a distorted track. So this is a guitar Sans amp copy. This is No Amp by Mockafix. Been using this for years as well. Here are all the settings. And then the EQ is pretty much the opposite of the last track. This is all mids, sort of like an EQ what I would do for a guitar. Big high pass to 170, cutting out some of the cloudiness, and then a low pass to 7K. So this first track here is doing the low end and the high end with no mids, and then this second track is doing all the mids and distorting them like a guitar. And when you put them together, you get a pretty gnarly, cool bass tone. That cuts through the mix perfectly. Right, let's go on the guitars. There's a few things I've done differently, but a few things I've done the same compared to the last 100% free mix. I do 2 guitar tracks on pretty much every mix. Pan one hard left and the other one hard right. And what I'm using is Amped Roots Free. I honestly think this is the best free guitar plugin out there if you want pedals, an amp, a decent cab section, and some great effects. I don't think it gets better than this for metal tones anyway. So what I've got going on, here are the amp settings. It's just a 1-channel amp, a nice modern distorted tone. So I've got the gate on. I've got the drive set like this to kick in the front end of the amp. Works really well. The cab section, this is just probably the best virtual cab section on any plugin, free or paid. There's a couple of cabs you can pick from with the free version. This is the Mega Oversized, which is, you know, the standard for metalcore and modern metal. I've got the 57, and then I've got a tiny blend with the Ribbon 160 on another speaker, which just gives a cool tone for this first guitar. And then the EQ, nothing out of the ordinary. I've got a high pass to 120 to really keep it out of the way of the bass guitar and the kick drum. If I was to not do this, the low end would have very little definition. And then I've got a big dip at 300. This is where the muddiness and the cloudiness of guitars are. I want to keep the guitar around the mid-mids and the higher mids to give me as much attack as possible. I don't want any woolliness or woofiness happening, so that's why I do that. A little dip at 4K, because I find pretty much on any sim with any IR, you'll get spikiness around this frequency, so I always dip. And then a low pass to 8K, very standard stuff on a guitar, a high pass and a low pass, and cutting out frequencies you don't like. On the second guitar, it's very similar. Got the drive on there to kick in the front end again. The gate is on the cab, slightly different. Instead of blending in the Ribbon 160, I got the R121, a very classic setup. The best way to get a bit of width, especially with metal guitars that are playing the same thing both sides, is to have a different enough sound either side to give the mix a bit of width. And then the EQ is pretty much the same. And I've got both of these rhythm guitars going through a master track. Every track will have a little button here, press that, and any tracks below will now go through this. So this track is now my rhythm guitar master bus. On this, I've just got TDR Nova, which is a great EQ plugin. But if you click on a band, you can make it into a multi-band compressor. So I've got this band here at around 200. You click threshold, and now you can compress this band. And I'm doing that Andy Sneap trick. If I just play the rhythm guitars on a chuggy bit, you'll see I'm getting some gain reduction at 200 Hertz. You see when it comes in with that one hefty chug, it's dipping a few dB. Those frequencies can bloom, and doing this little trick will control those low mids from blooming up. The EQ on both of the rhythm guitars doesn't quite cut out as much low end as I would want, even when it's high pass to 120. So I do a further high pass on the bus here at 120. And then I found there was just a little bit of, you know, unwanted fizz going on at 4.6K, and I'm just reducing that by 2 dB, nothing crazy. So that is the rhythm guitar bus. And I do have some automation going on. What I do on pretty much every mix, like 99% of my mixes, is when the lead guitar comes in, the rhythm guitars will dip by 1 dB or thereabouts. And when the lead's finished, the rhythm guitars go back up to where they were. It's a very common trick people use for automation. I don't do a lot of automation, but when I do, it's usually on guitars. Right, the lead guitar. Again, I went with Amps Roots, just, you know, because the effects, the built-in reverb and delay are brilliant. And they gave me exactly the lead tone I was after. A fair bit going on. The reverb's very like heavy-handed, but it's low in the mix. Nice bit of delay. I even used the chorus just to get things sort of sounding a bit more modulated and washy. Just a cool tone. With lead guitars, I like to cut out even more bass. So this is high pass to 211, and I've got a fairly wide reduction at 4K, and I'm high passing to 6,000 Hertz, just to keep things even more in the mids. The rhythm guitars, you can get away with more low end, more high end, but when you're up on the higher strings and playing higher notes, you know, you don't need any shrill top end. You know, you don't need any bass, really. So it's all about the mids with lead guitar for me. Okay, the vocals. You know, I get asked about this occasionally, and I did want to do a free template with vocals, because not everybody does that. So here's the metal vocals.
Wake into the darkest day. Really from the journey taker. I sorrow in this moment. Ow! Take it to the fucking edge.
Just some standard aggro kind of metalcore vibe vocals. Fun to do. So I'll show you the chain. We've got re-EQ with a massive high pass to about 350. You'll see a lot of people mixing, having way more low end in their vocals, but the way I do vocals is I go handheld. I'm fairly close to the mic, so there's quite a bit of proximity effect going on, especially when I'm roaring and screaming. The mic is fairly close to my face. The way I do it, I have the track blaring through my monitors. I don't use headphones, and there is a fair bit of bleed, but you really can't hear it in the track. And where there are gaps where I'm not roaring or singing, I'll just cut them out. Or I'll do crossfades. So here's the EQ. Because I'm quite close on the mic, I've cut it all out. If I was to go further up to like 400, it would start sounding thin. So you don't really want to go higher than this with the high pass. And I've got a little cut at 1K just to get rid of that honky sort of duck frequency out the voice. Not a fan of that. And a very modest high pass at 12K just to keep the vocals very much focused in the mids. Okay, recomp, it's reducing a lot. You just watch.
Wake into the darkest day. Really from the journey taker. I sorrow in this moment.
So we're getting up to about 15 dB of gain reduction there. That's fairly modest in a modern mix, really. A lot of big producers will compress on the way in a little bit and then do some further compression, and sometimes they're, reducing like 30 or 40 dB in total. I find that my mixes don't really need that much. I've got a de-esser on the vocal because the S's like stick out like crazy on my voice. If I was to just turn off the de-essers.
Wake into the darkest day.
You hear the T's and the S's really pop out there, but I've stacked two de-essers on top of each other and that really does the trick.
Wake into the darkest day.
You can still hear the enunciation of the consonants, but it's not, taking your head off. Speaking of taking your head off, this is the Headcrusher Free. This is, my go-to clipper, saturator, distortion plugin. It just rules. If I turn it off.
Wake into the darkest day.
Turn on the Headcrusher, it just sort of sets it on fire just enough for it to cut through the mix and be a lot more aggressive.
Wake into the darkest day. Really from the journey taker.
Yeah, love this plugin. Then I've got the Analog Rack Delay by Nembrini. Another go-to plugin, been using this for years as well. This delay isn't like super in your face, not as much as the clean vocal bit. It's just on, the mix is on 7%. I've got it synced to the track. The offset makes it stereo, so to turn this up all the way, it would go completely on the left and right hand sides with the vocal up the middle, but I've just got a little bit of that. 8%, that's all it needs. Keeping this delay fairly mono. Right, the clean vocal chain. I like to hear those. I like to hear the vocals by themselves soloed.
Dependency leading me. It's hard to see the extraordinary.
So yeah, very processed, very affected vocals. So we've got EQ. Got a high pass to about 200 because I am a little bit further away from the microphone. I hold it a little bit further away because when the singing is actually louder than the screaming, believe it or not. So just a high pass to around 200 there. Same 1K cut just to get rid of that duck honky frequency. And I've done a boost at 8K on this mix because I thought it needed to sound a little bit more expensive, and 8K is renowned as being the expensive frequency. It makes anything sound that little bit more lush. Compression, heavy compression again. I went with the modern vocal preset, which is the same, which is a very similar preset to what I use on the metal vocal. It just works for a modern mix.
Dependency
yeah, the way I'm singing there is fairly dynamic. I'm just trying to get it under control. So I've got the threshold at -30 there. I'm getting, you know, up to about 15 dB of compression. Gotta compress your vocals that hard or harder for them to really be consistent in the track. That is the way to do it. I haven't automated the vocals at all, but I have edited the vocals a fair bit. You can see I've done a lot of cuts and crossfades. There was a big plosive here where it goes dependency. That was a very harsh plosive, so I've just cut that part out and I've taken that part down in volume so it doesn't quite hit as ridiculously hard as it did. Dependency! And a lot of these edits are just to get the timing. I'm not altering any pitch. I'm not using any auto-tune or pitch correction software. I think that's a little bit bunk, to be honest. I think you should only use that if the track absolutely needs it. I think you should leave your stuff as natural as you can. Us working with VSTs and, you know, drum samples, things can get artificial, so it's nice to have a bit of humanity in there. And the vocals are a massive part of that. Got the de-esser again. Only felt I needed one de-esser on here. It's still reducing a fair bit, up to about 10 dB of compression on the S's, and the ratio is at 8, so it's reducing a fair bit. And now this is the secret sauce I use on lead guitars and vocals. It's Mercurial's Chorus. It's in the free stuff section. I love this plugin, been using it for years. I try and use it on every mix. It's not so much to get a chorus sound. As you can see, I've got the depth quite low. But this mix knob here, if you have it all the way down, it keeps everything sort of up the middle. The further you crank the knob, the more stereo it gets. And I've just got it sort of halfway up, and it will just spread whatever you put it on over the stereo spectrum. So I'll just turn the delay off so you can really hear what it's doing. So this is with it off. Dependency leading me. And this is with it on. Dependency leading me. It's hot. Can you hear that? It's spreading it towards the sides as well as keeping the middle intact. Just sounds fantastic. And I've got a little bit of, you know, chorusing going on just to get the vocal moving and shimmering just a little bit. And I've got the analog rack delay again on this vocal. Just sounded really good. It's slightly different. The mix is ever so slightly higher. Bit more feedback. The offset's at 12%, which sort of spreads it over the stereo spectrum just to get a more stereo feel. It's not ping-ponging, as far as I know. It's just delaying both the sides at the same time. Okay, with the master track, you know, we get asked about that a lot. I've got a whole video on this. It's linked below. Check it out. So I've got re-EQ. I'm just cutting out some super lows at 25 hertz. You know, anything below that, anything below about 30 hertz, you know, you really won't hear it. A little cut at 200, stuff I didn't like. A little cut at 500, just to get me towards more of a hi-fi sound. I do like, you know, a big thumping low end and a, you know, a big top end. A JS Exciter, just to get the high ends shimmering and sounding nice. And the Re-X comp, this thing is absolute magic for the low end. This is boosting and compressing the low end together across the whole mix, and it just makes the low end sound enormous and thunderous. Love it. And the stereo enhancer. All these plugins are built into Reaper, by the way, except for this one on the end, Mojo. I'll get to that. I'm only boosting the sides a tiny bit. The default is 100. This is at 108. Digital versatile compressor, I've mentioned this before. This is just boosting level. It's not compressing or working at all. And I probably should just boost from the Re-X comp, but this plugin's been there forever, and I did use it a little bit a few years ago, but it's just there and it's just boosting level, 3 dB. Then I've got the Event Horizon limiter clipper. This is a fantastic limiter and clipper in one. Set your ceiling, bring your threshold down, make your track louder and keep it under control. You really crank it, it'll start to peak, but my mix is sort of maxing out without anything on the master bus at about -10. So set this threshold to about -10. Yeah, it just works really well for getting your mix loud and controlled. And it's quite transparent too compared to other limiters and clippers. Then I've got the master limiter on top of the limiter clipper. This is just to grab the peaks, the peak transients of the track. If you watch this reduction here, it should only be reducing between 1 and 2 dB. Yeah, as you can see there, it's just grabbing the peaks, and then when they're gone, it just lets it go straight away. Very transparent, gives it that nice radio ready feel, and yeah, love it. Been using it forever. And then this is Mojo. This is all covered. Again, if you want a more in-depth rundown of my master chain, it's linked below. Check out that video. This is Mojo by Air Windows, and this is described as a loudinator or a biginator. And it just makes the track, it just tips the track over the edge, but in a transparent way, and just brings things forward and makes things jump out the speakers a bit more. So if I just turn it off. All right, I'll turn it on. I'm sure you can hear the difference there. There is a slight volume bump, but it's not just that. It's bringing things out the speaker. It's making everything shine and brought forward, which is perfect for a metal mix or an aggressive mix. It just works wonders. That is about it, guys. Even if you don't use the template, I hope I've shown you some stuff that helps you with your mixes. And yeah, guys, happy mixing. Alright guys, since you made it this far, I just want to plug my music. It's available from the links below. If you like metal, death metal, anything like that, check it out. Thanks for watching guys, I really appreciate it. And subscribe if you want to see more metal related stuff. I'll be back sometime with a video on something else, so until then, ciao.